Kate, I've always wanted one of these, and now I've finally got one on eBay.
Wow.
And I can't believe it.
What a retro classic. It looks impressive. Clearly I don't remember it from the first time round, but you do.
And it works.
Does it work properly though?
It does. I'm going to show you.
Are
this
you?
Is phenomenal.
Okay, what do we need then?
Well, we're just going to wait for it to fire up. There we go.
Have you got a disc?
And I have got one of these.
Of course you've got a disc.
Old
Why did I
floppy
ask?
discs. And as we go in, look, it launches.
Yay!
Welcome to Macintosh.
It worked.
Fantastic.
Hello and welcome to The Lucas Show with me, Kate McIntyre.
And me, Danny Lucas.
Now, Danny, I know there is method to your madness here in bringing in your new retro computer. You're not just adding to the studio,
Not
are
at
you?
all, no.
Why is it here then?
Well, this particular logo is extremely special to me, and there's a story behind that that's separate, but the man behind that is with us today, Rob Janoff.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Welcome to the
Welcome
studio.
to the UK.
Nice
you
to
so
see
much.
you.
Fantastic to see you.
It's great
amazing.
to be here.
I mean,
Amazing.
this is probably the most iconic logo in the world. Would you agree?
Sure, I'll agree to that.
I mean, today when I was coming here, I actually did a little experiment and I counted from leaving my flat to arriving at Lucas HQ. I saw that logo 17 times.
Wow, that's wonderful. One of my thrills is traveling around all over the world, seeing the thing that came out of my brain, people are relating to it in their language. It's a great honor, actually.
Absolutely. Now, I know, of course, you mentioned travelling all over the world there. At the moment, we have you in the UK in our studio, but you have been jet setting. So let's take a little look at what you've been up to.
Great.
Well, you certainly get about a bit, don't you, Rob?
I do, and it's been so much fun, especially coming here to the UK.
Yeah, so where have you been here so far?
Well, landed in London, did a talk at a conference. Right after that, went to Scotland, visited some friends in St. Andrews. Then back down to London. After London, we're doing some promotion for our book, and then it's off to Milan to work with another client.
The fashion capital of the world, Rob. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But your first time in Kent, I believe.
Yes, absolutely.
Ever. Fantastic.
And we're very excited to have you here, particularly Danny, because I know you have been a massive Apple fan.
Oh, I have. All through the 80s and 90s, huge Apple fan, and obviously connected with Rob a few years ago. Separate story there altogether, but I've got so much to ask Rob in person now that I'm meeting him about that journey that started back in 77, was it, Rob?
Yes.
And meeting Steve Jobs and creating this amazing brand that is now globally recognised wherever we go. What's the story there, Rob? Just tell us a little bit more about that, because I know you've written a book, but coming from you is going to be even better.
Back in the day, Steve wasn't known, Apple wasn't known, and he was just a young guy who was the president of a company, didn't look like one, long hair, beard. He loved blowing people's minds at meetings when everyone's in suits, and there he was. So that was my first impression, was what a weird guy. He wasn't a genius in my head yet, and he had this thing that was a computer to bring into the home, and that was my job, was to make it easy for someone to get a computer into their home. So I tried to make it playful.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned your book there, and I know in there you talk about having to get inside Steve's head to give you a better idea of the sort of thing he wanted for his company. I mean, getting inside the head of such a genius, how was that, and what did you discover?
Yeah, I mean, to make you create this, it's amazing, the story here.
Well, actually, I knew that he was very particular, and he was a computer guy, but there was lots of computer guys there then. In fact, Silicon Valley was in its infancy. New companies were springing up all over, and because of that, people like me, a designer, would flock. There was jobs there. And in addition to manufacturing and all kinds of support companies. So that was terrific, and a lot of us were getting work, which was great from that. And there were many people with small home computers. We called them home computers then.
Yeah.
And it was my job to make it distinctive, make it stand out. And it did. It lasted, and all the rest of them fell out.
Yeah, completely. I mean, how did that sort of creative process start with you then on this? Because maybe when you heard a computer company called Apple, that's a bit of an odd name.
I thought that was the best thing it could be, because a computer, complicated machine, hard, cold, with a piece of fruit, a natural thing, was a great dichotomy, and something to really make it memorable. And that's, I think, when we're doing branding, what do you do to make somebody remember? So that was the best. And that kind of thing doesn't happen every day. So it means you can play with color. In fact, color was the big deal with the new Apple computer. It was the only computer where you could make images in color. Besides that, you plugged it into your home color TV.
Really?
You didn't need a monitor.
Wow.
And colors would happen, and kids could play games and do homework, and people were balancing their checkbooks and remembering recipes. So it was a real new thing, and so a lot of it was making it fun, making it acceptable, because computers really had a hard, cold image at that time.
Yeah, I can imagine back then it was so ahead of the time in terms of technology that it was something that I remember at school that it was almost like you had to be like a scientist type guy to go into computers. Exactly. It wasn't for everybody. But that time in Silicon Valley, Rob, must have been an amazing time. I mean, it was a turning point, really, and
right.
I can't imagine how exciting that must have been for you.
It was great, and people were telling me, oh, don't get too attached to this company, because the big companies, the big firms are going to eat them for lunch. So
what did they know?
What did they know? So I'm so glad that they lasted, and
amazing.
Yeah.
And not only lasted, but always managed to stay one step ahead of the game, like yourself, Danny, with Lucas.
Well, this was what inspired me, really. I think knowing the story of Steve Jobs already, because I'd read the book, and being a big Apple fan, it was all about the design, the form, the function. So eventually getting, not to meet Rob in person, because it was always a Skype call back then when we first met, but to get Rob connected to me, to know that he could get into my mind the way that he'd done with Steve Jobs to create what he created for Lucas was an amazing thing. I mean, that connection was just something that gave me a lot of pride and made me feel like he'd created the Apple for the construction industry for me with my message.
One of the great things, would you agree, about Apple lovers, and we all are, is that we are so proud to show that logo. You know, we love having it on our computers and our phones, and even in the box now you get stickers of the Apple, don't you, Danny?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and it's lit up on the back as well. I love that. It's almost like a symbol of all the people around you that are connected to this amazing brand.
It's kind of like joining a club, and a lot of people want to be members of that club, which does my heart so good. Because it's not every designer that gets that opportunity. Also, every designer doesn't get their work to last this long.
It's timeless,
very
isn't it?
Unusual, very unusual.
It's timeless. I mean, the stripes, obviously, Rob, the colour in there, which we don't see so much today, but everything else is there. It's almost like it's gone through all these evolutions, but it's still the same at the core, and I don't mean that in a corny way. Actually, I realised I've said a bit of a pun there, but at the heart of this, it is still the same logo. It's fantastic.
Right, and all those things, you know, had a purpose. Like I mentioned, the colors meant something, and at the time, high tech wasn't so colorful. It was kind of blue. Everything was blue, and but I wanted to highlight the most important thing that I thought about the Apple, and it was the Apple II, that it could make images.
It's iconic, isn't it? The colours.
And then it's gone through phases of being lit up, and now it's sort of chrome or filled in. But do you think it'll ever come back full circle? Do you think the colours will ever have another day?
Well, I thought it was over with the colours. However, when I landed in London, I got an email that said that they are reviving the colours and they're using them to celebrate the new Apple headquarters in Cupertino that looks a lot like a space station.
Wow.
That's an amazing building. That is an amazing building.
And it has a lovely garden. I mean, not garden, it's a big park right in the middle of it. And in the middle of that is an amphitheater, and they've made arcs out of the colored stripes over the stage part.
Wow.
And it's also to celebrate and commemorate Steve.
Yeah, that sounds like a little Lucas show exclusive.
To be honest with you, I that would have been a hell of a job for me to have painted those stripes. I'd have loved to have come out and done that, Rob. That would have been fantastic.
Well, you know what they've done? They've painted the hallways with stripes, and they've painted the steps with stripes.
Wow, so that is completely back in as a mark of the original brand.
It's a real honor for me to be able to have something to do with that in the history of tech.
Yeah. Oh, we'll have to have a Lucas show trip out to see it.
I'd love to. We've worked with the architects that built that before here on UK projects. Foster and Partners for their iconic design there.
Great.
And that would have been my first overseas job. Definitely, I'd have jumped on a plane to
You need to be phoning them up and asking why you weren't down there.
I'm definitely going to do that now that I know about this paint colour thing. So
now, I also want to ask you, and I know, Danny, you know all about these conspiracy theories all around the Apple logo, you know, to do with where it came from, what's the story behind it, is it to do with Adam and Eve, is it to do with gay pride, you know, how does it make you feel when you hear all of this gossip?
Well, it tells me that people like the logo and they make up stories and they come up with their own ideas about what inspired me to create the logo. One was people were sure that because there was an apple involved and because there was a bite out of the apple, it had something to do with Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden and taking a bite from the apple of the tree of knowledge. So I can see how a lot of people put things together. That wasn't it. Another interesting story was that, this was to commemorate the gay flag and to commemorate the father of modern computing, Alan Turing, who committed suicide by biting a poison apple.
wow.
So there's a lot of wonderful, happy coincidences.
Really
well, it's not so happy, but
and that people have put all this time and thought and energy into trying to unpick the story behind the logo, and actually it was none of that.
It's so impressive to me, and I love it. I love that people make stories and are creative, because really that's what I think the Apple logo does. It promotes creativity. In fact, they've done stories about this where they've shown a group of college students the Apple logo subliminally. They didn't know they were watching it. And then they had two test groups. What would you do with a pile of bricks besides build a wall? And they had people who were exposed to the logo and people who weren't exposed to the logo. And it was amazing. The people who were exposed subliminally to that logo came up with a whole list of things you could do with bricks, as opposed to the people who weren't.
Yeah.
So it inspired creativity.
Yes.
It did.
Kate, just one thing that's really interested me about the logo as well is that it's got a piece missing of the apple, and I just wondered, Rob, if you could just explain that.
Right. Well, there are many round fruits. The way people eat an apple, it's kind of iconic itself. You take a bite. And I did that so people would know it was an apple and not a cherry. So initially it was a scale thing, but then I realized also that, well, I didn't realize it was a very happy accident. Bite, B-I-T-E, it sounds the same as bite, B-Y-T-E, which is a computer term.
Wow.
Of course,
And
yeah.
that was
Genius.
a happy coincidence. I didn't know that. In fact, I really wasn't much of a techie when I did that. I didn't know how to do computer language. So I was very excited and relieved when Macintosh finally came out and the operating system was intuitive.
Yeah.
And it invited me to get into the core of an Apple.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know, obviously, Apple's always been one step ahead of the game from day one.
Right.
And Danny, I mean, that resonates with you because here at Lucas, you guys are always one step ahead, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been inspired by things like McLaren, companies I work for, like Mace, Apple, you name it, anything that's to do with quality, Mercedes-Benz. So this has always been an inspiration for me, and certainly it was something that I was a big fan of during the 80s and 90s, and I was lucky enough to read a book about Steve Jobs' life, 2011, I think it was the Walter Isaacson book, and it really immersed me into the whole world of the way this guy thought, and that was an inspiring story in itself. So, you know, definitely some like-mindedness there, some similarities in terms of pushing boundaries.
So how did that then get you connected with Rob?
So, I'd gone on this journey for the last 30 years plus and got to this point in my career where I was able to put my own stamp on the business, and that prompted me to go and do something that most people thought I was mad, really. But I Googled who was the guy that created the Apple logo. And I just completely went on the internet and I found that it was this gentleman called Rob Janoff. I wrote a personal note to Rob, reaching out to him. I found out that he lived in Chicago and I wanted him to engage with me to create the Lucas brand. I thought I'd never hear again. And to my complete surprise, a week later, Rob came back to me and said, "Danny, I love your story and I'd love to work with you." And that is where it started, and we've never looked back since.
Well, before we hear any more about this story, let's take a look at your branding and see it in action. Here we are. So there we see the Lucas logo in all of its glory. Rob, before I get on to how you came up with that idea, Danny, I just want to ask you, why did branding seem like such an important thing for you with Lucas? Because I suppose the construction industry don't naturally jump on, let's have a great brand for our company.
Yeah, I mean, construction's renowned for people not really bothering with marketing materials, but for me it was really important, and I'd been inspired, as I said, by many things that I'd seen over the years, McLaren, Apple, Mercedes-Benz, and I just felt that we needed to do that in our industry, and for Lucas, definitely.
So Rob, when Danny contacted you and you liked the story behind the company, how did you then go about creating this new brand for Lucas?
Well, I know that when Danny took over the company and became the head of it, previously the family business accumulated a lot of different businesses. And so there was a whole box full of different logos, different typefaces, different stuff. And Danny is so into branding and the power of branding, I think because he was an Apple fan for a long time. He said, okay, we need a brand, a mark that will tie everything together. So people want to understand that we're a company that does everything about fit out and finish, and how do we illustrate that? So one of the things that I like to do is really research the company, find out what they do in detail. I didn't know fit out and finish was a thing. So I learned all about that. And what I tried to do was have the distinctive initial L be a major part of it, and then opposite the L is a shape that can be interpreted as a wall. That's what I tried to do, walls, because they do finishes on walls and what goes inside the walls and all that stuff. And it also created this illusion of, is this a cube? Is this a dimensional thing that we're looking of the outside of a building or of Mark? Or is this inside the space? So I was happy with that optical illusion, and because it described the company so well.
So Danny, when you first saw the logo then, what did you think?
Well, Rob presented me with a number of options, and by far this stood out to me as the thing that jumped off the page and was definitely depictive of me as a person, what the business stood for. And also, you know, with the shape that Rob's explained there with the sort of walls, but it was also about positivity and going forward for me. So I saw like an arrow there. I saw it as sort of like forward thinking. And it really sort of worked, the colours and everything. And I was just blown away with it, to be honest, Kate. I immediately knew that that was the mark for the business. And that's what we finalised on and we worked on, and ended up with this most amazing brand manual that Rob provided us that became like the blueprint for the business to move forward with.
Yeah, I know, Rob, you talked about trying to get into the mind of Steve Jobs, get an idea of what he wanted. How tricky was it to get into the mind of Danny Lucas? Because I know an awful lot's going on in there all the time.
Well, one of the things that really I was impressed with Danny was how into branding he was, and how very few heads of companies understand how important that is. And in addition to being very brand oriented, he's very precise. And so I wanted the logo to have sharp edges and to be precise in its color palette, in its shape. And it's rare to find someone who is precise and creative at the same time. So it's a really winning combination.
Yeah, there you go. That's a compliment, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm very honoured actually, Rob. Thank you for saying that.
So talk us through some of the branding on your products here, Danny, and why it works for you.
Well, I mean, look, everywhere you go in Lucas, whether it's on site or whether it's at our offices here, you will see the cube. You will see the Lucas cube. And, you know, some examples, we've got the caps that our guys wear and that we give to our clients. And I mean, it just really adds a classy look to a product that normally you wouldn't sort of pay attention to, but the detail that we've gone into, and the brand just works so well with the colours. These are really popular. These are Lucas jelly beans. Everyone in the construction industry in London knows all about these. They are the talk of all the sites.
And even the actual beans, just flick it over, are in the Lucas colours. That's attention to detail.
Exactly, the beans are in the colours. We've got coasters that we use. I mean, we're very precise, as Rob said, so it's about clear desk policy, everyone having everything. So we've got these beautiful coasters here that work perfectly. And, you know, even the digital tools that we're using. So recently we launched Colour and Concierge with Dulux, and you've got the Lucas brand on there. It's very prominent with the Lucas Cube. It all works beautifully, and it just ties everything together. We've got golf balls, we've got mugs, but it's everywhere.
Cue cards, everything.
And I mean, as we've seen, it's on everything. We live by the Lucas brand. It's part of who we are. It really does depict what we stand for, and we couldn't have done that without Rob bringing that to life and getting into my mind and actually bringing that out.
So, Danny, I mean, I have to ask you, what are the conspiracy theories behind this? I mean, are there any? And if not, you guys need to email some in, because there could be some stories here.
Like Rob's honoured about the fact that there are these conspiracy theories with the Apple brand. I'll be very proud if one day there's a load of books about what the Lucas Cube means. So,
okay, we'll get on to that. So back to branding then, Rob, while we have you here. Just tell us, in a nutshell, if you can, why is branding so important to a company? Because some people overlook it completely, don't they?
Right. I think branding really reflects the personality of a company. When you meet somebody, you see their face, and I think logos are the face of the company. You remember a face, you remember a logo. So I try to make it distinctive for that company.
So
That's a really good analogy.
What logos out there then do you think, oh, wish I'd designed that? There must be a little bit of creative envy bubbling under there somewhere, no?
One of my favorite logos is the Fedex logo, Federal Express. It tells you exactly what the company does.
Does it?
It takes packages from point A to point B. And to illustrate that, if you look carefully, between the capital E and the lowercase x, the space in between forms an arrow.
I never noticed that.
Well, now you'd know it.
I see the vans go past all the time. Did you know about that?
I actually saw the arrow, Kate, a number of years ago, and that's all I can see now. Whenever I see this
That's
logo,
it.
I see the arrow.
I will see
time.
the arrow this afternoon now.
There you
I have
go.
no
There
doubt.
you
I have
go.
no doubt. So, Rob, then let's pick your brains a little bit. For anyone who's out there who's trying to create a brand for their company, what are the top do's that you would suggest?
Well, one of the important things that I like to stress is keeping it simple. So many times when companies want a logo, they want to say everything, every wonderful thing about the company. And if you do that, things get lost and it become too complicated. So part of keeping it simple is to keep it meaningful and involve the viewer, like I just mentioned with the arrow. Research is so very important in developing a logo because you can't find out too much information about a company. And I find when I cram my head full of information about a company, so much that I can't think of anything else, it comes out in the most amazing ways. I tell people to do a lot of research, then walk away, do something else, go for a drive, have a drink, go listen to some music, get your mind off of it, and sooner or later, the idea will pop out. Something you see will spark in your brain the solution to your logo.
Well, I have to say now, looking at this coffee table, I am feeling like the odd one out as the only person on the couch who's not written a book so far. But the behind the scenes of the Lucas Show diaries will be coming out shortly. Until then, though, Danny, let's talk about your books. I know Rob had some involvement with your cover here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very proud to say that Get the Tin Out and Paint the World, which was the book that I launched last year, had a cover redesign recently, which Rob Janoff did for me, and I'm absolutely delighted with it. I think it's a fantastic job. He's come up with a personal logo here for me, and the way that he's expressed the title, it's just fantastic. I'm very proud of that, and obviously honoured because I also received a copy of Rob's book that he's launched, which he signed for me and is going to sign today as well.
Yeah.
And we will be looking to have a competition to give this away to our viewers. But this is an amazing book. I've completely immersed myself in it. Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, sure. So many people have asked me all these questions about the Apple logo and all. And I was asked to do a book really designed for young people, high school age, who are interested in graphics, graphic design, and people find the story of the Apple logo, how that came about, and some of the things that we've discussed. And so I was asked to do a book for young people that talks about a career in graphic design, which I do, and the origin of the Apple logo, plus other work that I've done more recently. So it was great to finally get this out. I never thought I'd write a book, but when I was prompted to do it, it just flowed right out, and now I don't have to answer all those questions.
No. Well, we should have just read the book, shouldn't
So
we?
Rob, would you be so kind as to sign this book?
Danny, I'd be delighted.
Thank you.
So is this hot off the press then, Rob, this book?
Yes, it is. In fact, tomorrow there's a launch in London on the book.
It's Fantastic. So we're getting one before that.
We are. And I know you don't just sign books, do you? You've been signing people's phones and
Yes.
laptops
Yes.
and
I think
all
we've had a
sorts.
queue of people here
We
waiting
have,
for that.
yes.
so-
The crew have all had theirs done, so don't worry, they've managed to get that, haven't they? Well, thank you so much for coming in, Rob. It's been so enlightening, hasn't it, Danny?
Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure to finally meet you after all of these Skype calls that we've had.
Absolutely, and it's
So,
been really fun for me. Thank you so much
Brilliant.
for inviting me.
Many years
Brilliant,
now.
thank you. And so obviously we're going to have a competition on social media.
Yeah, so
don't
look
we?
out on our social media, Lucas Group UK. This is definitely going to be something that we're going to be putting out there as a competition, and signed by Rob, which I'm very proud of.
Excellent.
So,
And if
amazing.
people want to find out a little bit more about Rob and what he's up to, you know how to do that.
So robjanoff.com
That's it.
would
Yeah.
be correct. So definitely
Perfect.
take a look there, and
Yeah.
you'll be amazed at the work that this agency are now doing. It's
no,
fantastic.
brilliant. And I know we've had a lot of feedback, as we said last week, to the show. Danny, you've got some
Yeah,
shout-outs?
I'd just like to say a big thank you to Pat Fitzgerald of Mace. We've got Shane McGovern of WeWork, and a few other people that have written into us. A big thank you to James Andrews as well for his great comments on the show. But please keep them coming, and please subscribe to the show, because we're really building a great audience
Yeah,
here.
brilliant. Well, thanks again, Rob. Enjoy the rest of your trip here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And we'll see everyone next time, yeah?
We will.
See you then. Bye.
Thank you.